Welcome, beautiful souls, to another enlightening episode of Accelerating Timelines with Astara and Bethan Carr. We're really grateful that you're here today because we're going to dive into a topic that is really essential, especially if you're a spiritual empath or an empath or really anyone on a spiritual journey. We're going to talk about negative projection, which is such a tricky topic and how it can impact us all, and also maybe how we can use it to understand our true nature and help us to protect ourselves and raise our vibration so that it no longer affects us. Hello, Bethan. How are you doing today?
Hi, Sarah. It's lovely to be here today. I'm good, actually. I feel each day kind of feels quite different emotionally at the moment because we're going through so many shifts. And today feels pretty balanced. I've been outside a lot, so that always helps.
Yeah, it does. I mean, it's really lovely sunshine here where I live, and it's just feels really uplifting to be in all the sun codes, like the light codes, and there's a feeling of springtime and new beginnings happening.
Yeah, definitely. And in fact, yesterday, every time I looked up into the sky, it must be a certain type of cloud, but all of them looked like angels and
Oh,
quite,
amazing.
really quite detailed, angelic pictures in the sky. And there was one that looked like it had a huge sword, so I was thinking of Archangel Michael.
Oh,
I just,
beautiful.
yeah, it was really beautiful actually.
You know what we've had a lot of here is like air dragons. Like you look up and they look like dragons or kind of wispy creatures in the clouds. And
Yeah.
actually when I've tuned into that, it's like they're air dragons trying to clear the air for us.
Oh wow, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love how all these beings kind of manifest in all these different ways if we're just able to see them and receive the communication.
Yeah, it's just about like being open to it, isn't it, really? And
Yeah, yeah,
it's amazing how closed down people are. And it's so important to like keep that childlike wonder and kind of questioning curiosity alive, even as we get older.
yeah, definitely. I was actually going through, I think it was one of my Facebook pages, looking at some of the posts, and I saw that I'd actually done a channeling from cloud energy. And it was just a really short one, but it was saying, like, just be more open to all the support and all the beings around you. And even cloud energy, well, not even, but it was saying, cloud energy is also here to support you.
Oh, that's so beautiful. And maybe very appropriate that we're talking about the air and clouds because it's all to do with the realm of thought and thinking and thought forms. And
Yeah,
that kind of segues us into what we're going to talk about today.
yeah. So we're going to be discussing negative projection, which I actually think is a topic that is discussed, like we kind of know what we mean, although we will kind of talk about what we interpret it as in a moment. But I actually think it's an area that people don't realize how fundamentally it's affected them probably a lot of their lives and how it may have really influenced what they think is their personality when it's actually probably being projected onto them a lot of the time.
Yeah. Yes. We had a really great deep dive into this, didn't we, off air? And so maybe we should start with what exactly is it? Like, what do we mean when we're saying a projection?
If I think about it kind of symbolically or energetically, it's almost like somebody's got a version of you or a perception of you, but it's actually not truthful. It's not like an objective analysis of who you are. It's something in their head that they've kind of come up with because there's a part of themselves that they don't like. I feel like I'm not saying this very clearly, but it's almost like they've got this package of energy that's like maybe it's their anger or it's their shyness or it's their awkwardness or their embarrassment or something about them that lives in their shadow because they don't like to admit that they have this trait or this quality. And so they almost give it like this package of energy and they shove it into your field instead. And so they might say, "Oh, Bethan, you're being really awkward at the moment," or I can't believe how angry you are all the time." And you might just think, what are they talking about? Like I haven't been angry or I haven't been anxious or I wasn't acting in a shy way, but they've it's easier for them to see it on you than it is to kind of feel that energy. It's almost like a frequency or an energy that they're trying to shove out of their energy field and they're trying to find a home for it. So they'll push it onto you and they won't understand the energy dynamics, but that is essentially what is happening. But do you want to sort of elaborate on how you see it as well?
I think that was a really great way of building the picture, Bethan, because it's like, where do we begin? Some of this is enmeshed with the idea that people have like a shadow part of themselves, which often an aspect of each person, if they have something they deny within themselves that they don't like, they can't cope with, it often gets pushed into their shadow. And then their shadow is it's really difficult for them to accept that part of themselves. So there are some people who are literally projecting their shadow, what they don't like, onto other people because they cannot accept that part of themselves into themselves and like create a whole balanced kind of organism within themselves. So that can be like a classic version of this. And I've noticed this in women's groups and situations where I've seen women, and this is a really good example where women sometimes, if they feel like if they're very, very self-conscious about their weight, often they will project that onto other women. And you'll notice that you'll say hi to someone and they go, oh, you look quite thin today, or have you lost weight? Or, they'll do a kind of projection check about what they're actually thinking about themselves. They'll project it onto somebody else. And for example, you can tell that they're almost like trying to uh, project their feelings of low self-worth or rage or anger onto somebody else uh, as a as a way that they don't have to accept it into themselves. And so that working with the shadow, when people aren't aware of their own shadow, often they're creating projections and placing them out in the world for other people to process and deal with.
A nuance of that, or kind of related to that, is when, and this is what I did actually the other day, is I was getting quite angry about something. It was like a situation from the past, and I was like replaying a conversation and kind of getting annoyed about it. And then later on, I think actually it's speaking to Astara, we had a conversation that evening, and we were diving into like how I was feeling that day. And actually, I was having a lot of grief and healing and processing things from a long time ago, a totally different situation. And I was kind of realizing that that's what I was angry about. It had been triggered the day before. And it's almost like I didn't want to face how hurt I'd been far in the past and how vulnerable I'd felt at that time. So I was kind of putting all the anger that had been triggered into this kind of slightly more recent situation that was easier for me to kind of send the anger to. So I'm
Yeah.
kind of trying to say it without really going into all the details of it, but sometimes we do that ourselves where it's too painful to really feel, or we feel like we shouldn't feel all that anger, or we don't really want to look deeply into our past at very kind of painful memories, but they've been triggered somehow. So as that trigger comes up, we push it onto something a little bit more recent that's we're not quite as attached to, or um, it somehow feels easier to be anxious or angry or sad about something else.
Find it difficult to process, so you kind of push it out of your field. Is that
Yeah,
kind of,
I
yeah.
think I think like with mine, it was a very old sort of memory and hurt that actually I didn't really fully process at the time or didn't understand. And so perhaps the depth of it was it was quite a deep wounding. It was almost too painful to kind of really go into it or feel it or process it. So I think I'd put it into my shadow. So it wasn't really like a trait, it was more an emotion, I think, that I then projected. And I projected onto, almost onto somebody else, blaming them for how upset I was when actually
Hmm.
it was kind of quite disproportionate. because a lot of it belonged somewhere else.
Yeah, and it's interesting. It's so good that you can notice that because part of our jobs here is to kind of really have mastery over our own thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. Like, and sometimes when there are bits of us breaking off or we can't process it, and we're sort of then, not wanting to accept that as a reflection of something in us, it becomes it becomes like a real challenge because then once we push things out of ourselves onto other people, then we're actually becoming lost in this mix and we can lose our own identity and access to, I don't know what I'm talking about. I really don't know
No,
what I'm talking about.
no, I think you're making a really important point actually, because I think what happens is we miss the opportunity to heal what really is the issue, what really is the root cause.
Yeah,
It's a missed opportunity if we're projecting all the time, and it's obviously a huge negative impact on the person that's being projected onto. That actually can, I think, a lot of us, especially as empaths, have experienced so much projection because we absorb it all, and because for various reasons, we're heart based. We do less projection because we're a little bit more aware of ourselves. And so it can mean you can live your whole life thinking your personality is a certain way because people have just projected so much in your energy field. You take it on as yourself.
that's true. And do you know what this is making me think of is I had a situation like in my early 20s, because often this happens before, we're formed fully, but while we're just still trying to find ourselves and trying to express our own identities. I mean,
Mm.
you're really lucky in this world if you suddenly, developed a fully formed identity by the time you're like 15 or something. Like I really think it takes time, doesn't it, to really grow into yourself and understand who you are. And I can remember, like in my 20s, I was part of this. I think I was invited along because my parents were involved or something, and it was about build kind of new age projects and getting funding for new age projects. And I'd written this really amazing project that I thought would really work really well. And I thought if I get funding for it, then I'll do it. And I can remember the guy who ran it went to speak to my mother and said, "Oh, is the star able to do this project?" And I think it's because I was quite shy. It took me a long time to come into my own voice. Um, I may have looked a certain way. I think I've always looked a bit kind of feminine and soft and even that in this lifetime has received a lot of projection onto it. Like people make assumptions like you're weak or you're not capable or like and I really find that when people do that, you can really feel it, like creating an almost a cage on your energy field, of like molding onto you a certain way of being. And it can be really easy, particularly when we're younger or if we're vulnerable and we just don't expect it, that we can be sort of have this identity placed on us, which isn't anything to do with us.
Yeah, totally. And you're right about that feeling. Like there've been times when I've just felt super uncomfortable about someone's behavior or conversation I've had. And it can be people that I know quite well, people that I've generally kind of trusted or liked, but I can feel the heaviness. And then there's been conversations I've then had with you. I've tried to process something, and we've realized, okay, you've just been projected onto. That's what
Yeah.
your the heaviness that you're feeling is that cage that you've just described. It's like they're trying to box you into a certain type, a type of person, or like it can be about your intelligence, your looks, your personality. It can be so many different aspects that they project onto. And it's almost like they're telling you you are like this,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
but not in so many words, in a different way of expressing. And it feels super heavy when people are doing that. And that's probably a sign that you're being projected on. If something feels really uncomfortable, there's a heaviness, it's probably your inner child letting you know, no, this is untruth.
Yeah. And like I feel like I need to flag up something here because if somebody has a very strong projection onto you, um, then it can almost be like sending a spell. Like, and I say this, with really being very serious about what I'm saying, because I remember going through a situation where people would like project onto me a way of being, saying that I was quite like a victim. I was a victim. And they would say, they kept kind of repeating it. It was somebody in my family actually. And they kept repeating it. And when they repeated it, they would then sort of do a hand gesture. And they was doing it in such a way that it was like, like being kind to me or doing me a favor. But what I actually realized was I had to pull out of my energy field what was actually a projection about about making me a victim. Now, I think there's a huge difference between recognizing, oh, that person's going through something which is where they feel unsupported and they're exploring their victim consciousness, or like they're having an experience of being a victim. That's quite different to actually labeling someone a victim and saying it, or you are, or do you see what I mean? Like it's like
Yeah,
placing it on their identity. And I think it can be quite dangerous. And I've noticed that some people do it with kids where they say like things like, oh, you're very shy, aren't you? Or oh, you're not very good at that, or you're a show off, aren't you? And it's like these kind of identity statements are actually very, very damaging for one's self recognition, because if it's the wrong statement, then people can take that in and go, am I like that? Who am I? And it's not actually acknowledging and honoring people for who they are, because you find that people aren't actually being seen for who they are.
yeah, yeah, that's totally true. And I think this, yeah, it's especially important, I think, to be really wary of what we say to children, because, like you said, they haven't formed their, although they're very sovereign and they have a very strong sense of self, it's very easily kind of influenced, I think, as well, especially by people that they think they should be able to trust.
Yeah.
Um, and another point you were making about, people intentionally projecting an aspect or a quality onto us, I think that's extremely real, and I think it's something that they even do to like third parties. They might project something about me onto somebody that I know, or isn't better, or very subtly. And there's quite a lot of intentional projection like that going on, where people are building pictures of us that are either to make us believe that or to make somebody believe it about us. Um, there's, different forms of this, that some are subconscious, so people projecting their shadow because they won't look at it and process it themselves. And then there's people doing it intentionally, as a way to kind of dampen our power, dampen our sovereignty and our kind of confidence as beings. Um, so yeah, we've got kind of two different angles there really going on.
And another one, I think it's sort of linked, is when people have fear projections. Because I remember saying, was it someone, a friend of mine ages ago, said she went running in the park or jogging in the park, and she lived in like Manchester or something. And I remember another friend like saying, oh, is that safe, or is that, and she was kind of concerned, but she was also actually projecting her own fear on my friend, and she said, well, actually, please don't say that. I remember her being quite self-aware. She said, please don't say that to me because I'm trying to overcome my fear of being in certain spaces. So it's a bit like people can project out of themselves a kind of fear-based vibration that then has an effect on someone else. It's like a way of influencing people's behavior, or like from a very fear-based patterning.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it's great that your friend is self-aware enough to kind of put a boundary up there. And that's what I was going to touch on next, sort of like when you do start to really embody yourself fully and be aware of your boundaries and be energetically aware, you can start to really push back on the projections. And I would say, um, like we were talking earlier about, people in their 20s are still really working out their identity, and I would say right through 30s as well. And for myself, it's only been probably very, very recently that I'm fully pushing out all the projections that I've had. for
Yeah.
decades. And now I can feel quite different to I did maybe even just 1 year ago.
Yeah, and what does it feel like to be pushing out those projections? How do you feel when you've able to do it?
I feel way stronger and I feel way less affected by other people's opinions of me. And I think I've always been aware that we shouldn't be bothered by other people's opinions. I've always been someone that's like had my own truth and not really been worried about disagreeing with people. But I think it used to hurt me if people said certain things, whereas now instead of taking that on and thinking, oh, am I like that? Have I done that? I can really feel into it. Go, that's not actually my personality. So what you've just said is actually untrue. Whereas actually before I would have taken it on probably some of these projections.
Yeah, and when I've worked with people and looked at when the projections come up, like when I'm using clairvoyance and I can see the projection on the field, it looks almost like a sort of an energetic patterning, like it can be a veil or a cage or a something which is like creating it's a pattern actually that's almost like a program that's pushed into somebody's energy field that's there. And it's interesting when you're saying it's kind of released, how you feel, because I've noticed that the how I've noticed someone's projecting onto me is often I get angry. I can feel like,
Yeah,
say I'm with someone and we're having a conversation, I can feel the projection on my energy field. I then, this was before I became more self-aware, but I would get very angry and irritated. And I couldn't work out why I was feeling so angry because it seemed like quite an innocent conversation or exchange. But when I've seen with clairvoyance, what actually is happening, they're almost placing a pattern or a vibration in your energy field. Like that's what they were doing in my energy field. And then because I felt it in my energy field, the natural defense mechanism, it's almost like our immune system, but also in our energy field, is to push out what's foreign, to push
yeah,
out what is not healthy for us. So it's very interesting to see these little cues because if you get too many projections, and I would say that sometimes people are receiving like a whole day of projections from all different types of people, then your energy field becomes really clogged up. And I think there can be like a low level kind of rage going on or anger, and and it's literally like you've been invaded in your energy field with other people's patterns and thoughts and projecting onto you.
yeah. It can feel kind of suffocating. But I think it's really important that you say that it kind of brings up this rage and this anger and to remind ourselves that it's our emotions are very powerful to push stuff out. So you can use that emotion like you have it been to then say, no, I'm not receiving this. This isn't truth. It's not part of my energy. And your anger and your rage is coming through so that it literally is like a momentum or a push, a force to push those energies out. So, we always want to be working with our emotions. They're really powerful and they're very valuable.
And what I want to say on that point was the experience I had in my 20s was I would feel all of these projections, imagining them like little darts of energy, like, and by the end of the day, I'd have like 60 darts of energy in my energy field. Then I would feel this kind of low level anger, rage. It would be very difficult to be around people. And then on top of that, people would then project onto me the fact that I was angry or irritable. So it's almost like what it can become is like this awful self-fulfilling prophecy where you then have to like almost retreat or withdraw from people to regulate yourself, to like clear away all those little things, to then make it easier for you to be with people because actually you can then just feel really, really angry all the time or irritated. And it's because you've literally been violated by these thought projections onto you from other people.
Yeah, and it seems to be, if they're doing it from their shadow, it can really be that they are actually gaslighting you because then they're saying, well, why are you so angry? "Oh,
Exactly.
because I've got half of your shadow in my energy field and you're wanting me to deal with it because you won't deal with it. Um,
Exactly. Yeah.
you know, it's then difficult because you become the one reacting, whereas they seem to be calm because they're totally numbed out to their emotions. They're totally disconnected from their emotions,
That's
and they're
right.
sending them more to you.
And that's an experience I had with quite a few partners and partnerships and also friends, particularly around anger. They didn't want to own and feel their anger. And so it was easier for them to project it onto me so that I felt it, which is very common with empaths, to be feeling and experiencing the emotions. This is more kind of astral energy, the emotional energy rather than mental, but it's similar. And then you're processing all that anger and emotion, and that person has no idea that it actually belongs to them.
Yeah,
Not a clue. It's just a bit crazy.
I mean, it's brilliant to bring this into our awareness because you see it not only can for your own benefit and know that you're not going crazy and and how to keep yourself regulated, but also to see people doing it to others so that you can kind of not. Sometimes people can jump on a bandwagon of thinking, oh, that person over there is always kind of a little bit chaotic or always a bit like this. And sometimes I think it's actually because a load of people are projecting things onto them. You know,
Yeah.
they're kind of scapegoats in our communities as well or groups. Um, and one other thing, just going back to what you were saying about feeling all the little darts, often it's interesting how we perceive the projections or the type that are getting pushed onto us. But for me, I often feel like I'm being tied up with rope. I feel like I'm almost like a binding, which we know can be intentionally sent. Um, but it's almost like people want to tie me up and kind of disempower me. You know, it's always seemed to be like a dampening energy that comes in.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was just feeling into that and how that has probably impacted me quite a lot over the years.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because I've also experienced maybe something slightly different where people want to shut me up. They don't want me to speak. And then I'm in situations where, it's almost like me speaking is going to be an issue for them. It's going to like cause a problem for them. So they'd rather I didn't speak. And that can just feel like a lot of isolation. Um,
Yeah,
like having groups where somehow I'm asked to leave or you're kind of pushed away or you're sent away into exile and isolation. And when I've looked at that back through my own timelines and ancestral energy, there is often, and I've looked at this with clients as well, there's often a scapegoating kind of pattern that's there. I mean, scapegoating, if people don't know what that is, it's a practice that used to happen more in kind of tribal societies where they would pick I think it was a goat originally, and they would send that goat into the wilderness and like send with it all their toxic energy really, and it was a way of maybe appeasing the spirits or getting rid of that what they saw as a toxic energy. And that also then, if we follow that narrative through, sometimes they would send a member of the tribe away or the family member away. They would send them away, and that person would almost be carrying all of the toxicity of the group that nobody wanted to deal with. And we've seen that then happen with whole communities, like where whole races of people are asked to leave a tribal land or leave somewhere carrying this kind of heaviness, this difficulty that nobody wants to really deal with. And most recently, I think we see it a lot with spiritual people, empaths in their own families, where they're the ones feeling it and experiencing it and having this heightened awareness, and all the other members of the family don't want to deal with their emotions, don't want to deal with their toxicity, and they almost place it all on that one family member, and they call them the black sheep, and they like, place it all on them. And that is a similar kind of pattern of this scapegoating situation.
yeah, I think a lot of empaths definitely experience that. It's almost like they feel like their energy field is just being constantly being prodded. See
Yeah.
how far they can be pushed before they kind of, really push back and then get blamed for reacting in a certain way or being a certain way.
Yeah.
It's quite challenging. And I was just feeling into actually a little bit about the different reasons why this happens, and we've kind of touched to some extent on all the intentional thing. You know, it is done intentionally as well. It's a form of control and dominance. But also, I think with the people that aren't so aware, like it's their shadow, they don't know they're projecting, they're just doing it quite sort of subconsciously. I was feeling like there's a lot of people around the globe that just aren't grounded enough. They're not grounded enough into the earth, so they don't naturally process their emotions down through their body and into the earth, which is kind of the natural way that we process our emotions. And so they've got these emotions flying around in their energy field, and they just throw them out rather than, it's quite symbolic. It's subconscious, but the more grounded we can be, the more we can cope with our emotions.
That's such a valuable tip there, Bethan. And one thing I had an insight on today when I was doing a reading is if somebody is somebody is under attack, like psychic attack from very toxic thought forms from another person, which is a kind of projection as well. It's the same if you're with a person where their thought forms are very toxic and they're attacking you. I was shown that the more we can use the frequency, the love energy of 528 Hertz, the love frequency, then that actually dissipates those kind of thought forms. So it's almost like we have a natural antidote. Like if we have like toxic thought forms, and we, accidentally release them or send them out to people, if our hearts are in the right vibration, actually it will dissolve those thoughts, it will dissolve those projections. But if it isn't, like if we don't have enough love energy, either in ourselves or in environment, then actually those toxic thoughts are released and are around, like a sort of and often the very sensitive person will feel that and receive them. The actual remedy I did for my client was to use this frequency in her space so that she could break up these toxic thought forms before they affected her.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Like being able to, provide the tools and provide the antidote so somebody can then stop that from happening.
Yeah.
That's something I was just thinking about as you were talking. Oh yeah, just thinking about, when these kind of negative thought forms are flying around, it's very natural for empaths to subconsciously be wanting to balance everything because they're so energetically sensitive that, we're always trying to balance the environment and even things that really aren't our responsibility to balance. So it can be overwhelming if there's a lot of them flying about, not being transmuted and not being processed.
Well, I think you're right. And actually, I believe that the healers, the light workers, the empaths are the more evolved beings that are here on the planet right now. And they came here to clean up all this mess that that humans are in, um, and to reteach people how to have empathy, how to move towards unity consciousness and the vision of the heart, the shared heart, and to be aware of sensitivity, like whatever we create with our energy fields, our minds, our emotions, whatever we're creating has an effect. And the trouble we've got is that empaths feel that effect, but most people who aren't in touch with their own energy, they don't realize that they're creating toxicity around them, and that actually it's their responsibility to clean it up.
Yeah, yeah, I think we need more people like understanding what they're responsible for. Um, it breaks my heart when I think about how children are impacted by this. Sometimes you can be in a space where the kids are running about, maybe being chaotic or noisy, and you've got all these kind of older people or adults in general tutting or kind of getting annoyed. And I'm thinking, do you know what? Those kids are probably processing your unresolved emotions that you
Yeah,
can't deal with. And that
absolutely.
happens so much. Um, and all we can do is try and like create a nicer space for the kids so they're not having to deal with, because these kids now, these new generations, they're coming online with incredible gifts, incredible like energetic awareness. They might not consciously be able to like verbalize that, but they're probably processing and sensing things far beyond what we ever have. Um, and they're going to be the healers and and doing amazing things, and people don't understand how much they're dealing with.
Yeah. And I think that's so valuable what you've just said because the problem we have is that there's been many generations of people who are very stuck in the physical realm, meaning the 3D, meaning what that they only believe what they see, hear, sense, and feel. And they do that quantitatively, meaning like they can only see what's physical, like a table or a chair or, like an animal. But actually, we've got these incredibly sensitive healers and light workers who actually see, sense, and feel through their higher senses. They're more clairvoyant, cognizant, clairsentience abilities, where they're aware that there is energy that has a vibration and has an effect on everything around us. And so we've got these two kind of really weird worlds. And I think my parents' generation, although I have to say my mum's quite unusual in that because she comes from a family of healers and clairvoyants, but most of the older generation really had no idea that there was this non-physical energy really that had an effect on people. I mean, I can remember people when I was growing up even not wanting to feel an emotion, like they even doubted whether emotions were real or um the whole feeling of an emotion was like a medical event, it needed to be,
Yeah,
as soon as you had an emotion, you had to kind of hide it or you had to sign yourself into a mental hospital. I mean, it was really quite insane how people viewed something that is so natural as who we are as humans.
yeah, it's something natural and something powerful. I think um, our emotions are part of our strength, and they're part of how we create and manifest. And it's almost been possibly a bit of an agenda to disconnect people from their emotions, especially men. They've really been blocked from really understanding how emotional they are. They're very emotional beings, yet they're constantly telling themselves that they're not and being told that they're not. And it takes away a lot of their power, a lot of their strength, and a lot of their power to not be able to use their emotions in a beneficial way.
Yeah, I mean, emotion is energy in motion. Like it's astral energy. It's very, you're right, it's really powerful. And we're learning that through manifestation techniques and like the power of your emotions to create what you want.
And all when we if we go back to this projection, if I really want to push out the projections, I'll use my emotions to push that out. That's what strengthens my aura. That's what strengthens my sense of self. Is to push out, like we were saying. So if you want to kind of really be in touch with who you are and be amplifying and kind of sending out the signal of who you are on the earth and taking up space, you really need to be in touch with emotions.
Yeah.
That's what will help you.
And a healthy dose of anger is actually a massive clearing, purifying, and boundary keeper, like a boundary
Yeah,
strengthener as well.
yeah,
So, and most people, and particularly women, are taught to be afraid of their anger, to not display their anger, to not show their anger. But actually, if you think about it like a purifier and a sword and a shield, it actually creates a very good boundary if you can be
yeah,
very clear with your anger and energy.
definitely, definitely. That's been something that I've learned recently. That, like you were saying, my anger comes up when I feel like my boundaries been really violated. Then anger is like the predominant emotion that will come through to push back the boundary.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's interesting because in Chinese medicine, anger comes from the element of wood, and wood is a kind of protective quality to it. It's
Yeah, yeah,
it's got this action-based kind of protection and it makes things happen, like it creates, if something's not right, it creates justice. And so there's, it's really people beginning to understand that if they're having these signs in their body, of feeling sort of low level irritation and anger, often that is because you're pushing, out of your energy field something that perhaps isn't good for you.
yeah, yeah, that's perfect advice. And just another reason why we really want to be very self-aware and sensing what are my emotions right now? When am I feeling something? And trying to tune into it more so we can understand what's going on with us. What are the dynamics? What are we coping with?
Yeah. So coming back to our projections and understanding, I want to kind of say something here that because I've received a huge amount of projection onto me, and it's taken me a very long time in my life to realize, firstly, it wasn't me. Secondly, that projection was poisonous or very disruptive to my energy field to the point where it would be very difficult for me to function and regulate like my and feel good actually in my body because of all these other projections. So there would be an effort to kind of push out what was not mine and then come to terms with, well, what is mine? Like who am I? Like what is my identity in this kind of mess where people have projected all this stuff onto me? And so it's quite an important part of the process, I think, to building your self-image, like who you know yourself to be. If you've grown up in a situation where you have experienced a lot of projection.
Yeah, I think that's something that many people are going to be finding themselves rebuilding sort of at this time, actually. I think we're at a pivotal time where our awareness is much stronger, our boundaries are getting stronger, and a lot of people will be wanting to reconnect with truth and understanding that they might not be who they thought they were.
Yeah.
But I think that's like a step by step process, and it's very organic, and it's about connecting into your desires, your passions, um, and remembering what's real. Like what's real is like for me, for example, it's connecting to nature, like filling my energy field with organic, real energies that are unconditional love, and following the passion of my heart. That's when you start to sense who you are and what you like, and having a constant practice of pushing out everything else. I think at the moment it is quite a constant practice to keep the boundaries all the time.
Yeah. And you know, we had this conversation off air that one of the things I became really aware of when I meet people, when I talk to people, I went through a phase of like I really want to hold like the highest vibration. Like if I feel like I need to project onto someone, which I don't actually do that anymore, but I would always try to hold the highest vision of them that I could because I was aware of how dangerous a negative projection could be, like how detrimental it could be. But as time's gone on in my life, now I just have a space. Like, so when I meet people, I don't try and push on them my energy, like my mind, my projection of them. I I just leave a space, which is like a space, and I imagine it almost like a ball of light between me and that person, where they can be exactly who they are in their highest manifestation of themselves, and I can be exactly who I am, and to kind of also understanding that is a living quality, like it's not fixed. It may have a signature of energy, but it's not actually a fixed form. So in that way, I'm not fixing that person into something, and I'm not fixing myself. It's like it allows this kind of spaciousness where people can, like, I have permission to be who I am in this moment, and they have permission to be who they are.
Yeah, that's a really profound way of thinking. Yeah, really, really important and beautiful actually.
Well, I just feel like we've had so much in this life, in this paradigm of not allowing people to really be who they are, or not like and not appreciating them to be that, whatever that is. And we don't actually really know each other, which I think is a really it's is really quite sad.
So we miss out on so much by just accepting what we think someone is without their true depths. And I've only ever met a very small number of people on the planet really that go into situations like you just said, with that openness, with that willingness to just accept and see how someone is without pushing a projection onto them. And I think it's been very common through all of our societies, certainly in the Western world, to constantly want to fix things, like you were saying. And I loved what you said about allowing something to be living, having the living energy that is dynamic and it moves. And as soon as we want to fix something, it's the opposite of that.
Yeah.
So perhaps we're coming to our conclusion of this podcast. If there's anything you want to kind of give us guidance or further insight, Astara, on how people can sort of navigate this area.
Well, I just wanted to say, like, obviously there can be negative projection, and we've tried to give an example of like positive projection where you can really almost help people to be who they are. But if you're in like, because we live in a society where negative projection has been like the norm, often we have to kind of then dial back and relook at that so we're not perpetuating it. So I would say the first step to healing negative projection, if you find that you're doing it, is awareness. So, like becoming aware of your thoughts and emotions when you meet someone or a situation, and just to notice and pause for a moment if you're feeling like judgment or fear or anger or anything in yourself, if you're trying to place that on the other person. And a good way of like questioning yourself is this projection coming from my own emotions or my fears or my past experiences? And that's, to me, that's like the first step to breaking the cycle.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, and I would just sort of reiterate that really, just becoming really sensitive to like ramping up your sensitivity of how you're feeling. Like we numb out so much with distractions, but really getting comfortable and knowledgeable about how you feel and what your emotions are and how they feel differently in your body. Like just becoming hyper aware of your body and your feelings and your emotions. And then a tool I use, this is kind of when somebody's projecting onto me, or if I get a sudden um, difference in emotion, I will ask, is this mine or is this someone else's? Does this belong to someone else? And that's just a nice little practice to remind yourself that not everything you feel is your own, and just have those sort of check-ins.
Yeah. That's so true. And the other aspect of this, just as you're saying, is often when we are projecting onto people, unconsciously or consciously, what we're actually doing is projecting onto their inner child as well. And I know we touched on this earlier that people do it a lot with children, and children are very, open and they absorb that. They absorb that behavior, they absorb that projection. But also to be aware, even in adults, when we are doing our projection, it's often the inner child that gets that picks up that negative pattern, and and it's not nice. It's not nice for that person to have that experience, and it can really feed into their own wounding and triggers. So the more we can have like self-awareness, and stop ourselves from doing that, like a mindful awareness, then it's actually we're going to have a better society if we're able to kind of stop doing that. We've had a really lovely chat, but I think we're coming to the end of podcast today. Is there anything that you think could be helpful, Bethan, in terms of any wisdom you have, or maybe even a technique you'd like to share before we close?
Yeah, I mean, I go back to kind of embodying as much of your own energy and as much natural energy as you can. And what I mean by that is your guides, the archetypal energies, nature energies, like connecting as much as you can to what is real and true really helps to strengthen your energy, strengthen your aura. And so these projections, it's much harder for people to push stuff into your energy field when you're taking up the whole of the space. It's when we think we're less than, we're not enough, when we're not connected to every aspect of who we are, which is actually multidimensional. It's when these other energies kind of find a little bit of a gap. So keep up with your practices, whatever that is, if it's journaling or sport or yoga or meditation, everything that makes you feel really in the moment. If you're on a spiritual path, obviously connecting with higher beings, these are aspects of you, and understanding that so that you're just embodying more of who you are, not just physically embodying, but energetically embodying.
It's really important that we just don't judge ourselves. A lot of this is around judgment and judging each other and also judging ourselves. So I really love how you've framed that to really just be who you are, like take up space and be who you are. And this is pretty much a beautiful journey of discovery if we can like keep other people out, radiate ourselves outwards rather than absorb people's negative projections onto us.
Yeah, and I just want to add to that is it's actually really important for the earth right now that we are our authentic selves and we are emitting almost like a radio signal of our truth all the time. And like we said, a lot of these, a proportion of these projections are intentional, and so sort of standing up and saying, no, this is who I am and this is my truth, and really pushing these energies out is important.
Oh, thank you, Beth, and thank you for your wisdom. And thank you to all our listeners for tuning into this episode of Accelerating Timelines. I really hope you've gained some insight on how to recognize and heal from negative projections. Just remember that your energy is very, very powerful. And so we're all learning mastery of how to align with our higher selves so that we can create a better world. So thank you for tuning in this week, and we'll see you next week for another episode.